Hello everyone, good morning and good evening. I am Apurva Sinha, a senior data scientist at Walmart Global Tech. I, along with Sindhuja Subramaniam, who is a staff data scientist at Walmart Global Tech, will be co presenting this workshop on time series forecasting. By the end of this workshop, we hope that you will be able to understand more about what kind of models can be used for analyzing and predicting a time series dataset. In this workshop, we'll be covering topics like time series fundamental, models for time series, and Sindhuja will help us in understanding a particular use case around forecasting demand and sales. Let's start off with time series fundamentals. What is a time series? Time series is a sequence of data labeled by time. In time series dataset, time is the independent variable and our goal is to make a forecast for future. And an example for this is a daily sales forecast for Walmart grocery where we are trying to predict what will be the forecast of daily sales. In the forecasting steps, we divide the problem into few steps like problem definition, what kind of data do we need or information and capturing that data, performing exploratory analysis, selecting our model for the time series dataset, and finally using and evaluating the model in order to verify how accurate our predictions are. To develop a good time series forecasting model, there are three important factors that we need to keep into consideration. Starting with seasonal variation, these are the patterns that repeat in fixed magnitude with known time intervals. As we look on the right hand side at the monthly antibiotic sales, we see there is a dip at the start of each year and it increases again to the highest by the end of the year. These are the seasonal variations. The next one is the trend. Trend is a long term increase or decrease that we see in the data. In this data set, we see an increase starting from 1990s till the end of 2005. So that means we have an increasing trend in our data set. The third one is the cyclic variation, which are the patterns that vary in magnitude with unknown time intervals, and we currently don't see it in this particular example. Some of the simple plots that can be used to visualize a time series dataset are line plot, seasonal plot, month plot, and correlogram, which will help us understand what kind of time series dataset are we dealing with. Before working on any modeling, in terms of performing an exploratory analysis, it is very important to understand whether our dataset is a stationary time series dataset or a non-stationary. What is a stationary series? Stationary series is a series where its statistical properties don't change with time. It means it should look like something like this in the diagram where it's roughly horizontal, having constant variance and autocorrelation is zero. A stationary time series dataset is also known as a white noise. On the right hand side, we see a non-stationary dataset where it's not following any of those properties that we have a stationary. Plus, some of the ways of identifying these data set, whether they are stationary or non-stationary, is a time plot. What happens in a time plot like this? We can see there is some patterns around it, whether it's seasonal or trend. Combining any of these makes it a non-stationary, and we can easily get rid of it and convert it into a stationary time series dataset using techniques like detrending or differencing. In order to identify a non-stationary series, we usually do a plot around ACF, where in the ACF plot of a non-stationary data set will decrease slowly, whereas for a stationary data will drop to zero quite quickly. We'll go in depth around this in the future slides. What is seasonality? This is the second important topic around time series dataset. Seasonality refers to periodic fluctuations. For example, in this diagram of US retail sales, the Thanksgiving sale peak followed by the slowing down sales, where we see continuous drop and increase in the sales for a long period of time. This is the seasonality. There are two types of seasonality. additive seasonality and multiplicative seasonality. In additive seasonality, the general trend increases or decreases over the time, but the amplitude or the magnitude of seasonality tends to remain same. This is called an additive seasonality. Coming up to multiplicative seasonality, when the amplitude of the seasonality tends to increase larger or smaller based on the trend, it's called the multiplicative seasonality. What is an autocorrelation? Autocorrelation is a similarity between observations as a function of time lag between them. In the diagram on the right hand side, we see a pattern repeating itself at a finite in time interval. Let's look at the lag 1 and the lag 24. They are repeating itself at these intervals. Similarly at lag 12 and lag 36. That means we are seeing an autocorrelation in this particular data at each 24th lag interval. One of the way of identifying whether our time series dataset has autocorrelation is to perform the Durbin-Watson test. In this, our hypotheses are like these. Our null hypothesis is that we don't have a first order autocorrelation, and our alternate hypothesis is the first order autocorrelation do exist. When we perform the Durbin-Watson test, it gives us the output in between 0 and 4 with the following meaning. When the output is 2, that means there is no autocorrelation, and if the output is between 0 to 2, that means it has a positive autocorrelation, which we usually see in our in any time series dataset. If the value is between 2 to 4, it's the negative autocorrelation, which is less common in the time series dataset. After understanding these three important topics about stationary, non-stationary, seasonality, and autocorrelation, so let's look at an example of DGI index and see if the data set is non-stationary, and if it is, how do we convert it into a stationary. In this example of DGI index, we have done a time plot. Seeing the time plot, we identify that the problem is definitely not stationary because we see a difference in variance, and plus it is not constant. In order to support that, we have done an ACF plot where we see the spikes at all different lags are slowly decreasing. That means it's a non-stationary data set. Now to convert it, we'll do a first order differencing and do a time plot which shows us that it's roughly constant. That means it can be a stationary data set. Now to support that, we do an ACF plot where the spikes at different lags are within the confidence interval. That means after applying the first order differencing, we can prove that this dataset has been converted from non-stationary to stationary. Let's understand more in depth about differencing. We apply differencing in order to stabilize the mean of a time series by removing changes in the level and converting it into a time series dataset. There are different types of time series differencing. The first one is the first order differencing, where the difference series is the change between each observation in the original series, and the formula is y dash t is equal to yt minus 1. The second is the second order differencing. Let's say in any case where after applying first order differencing, we see that the data is still not stationary. There it becomes necessary to difference the data a second time, and the formula looks like y dash t is equal to y dash t minus 1. The third type of differencing is the seasonal differencing. In the seasonal differencing, we take a difference between a observation and the corresponding observation from the previous year. In this case, we identify M as the seasonal pattern or the seasonality order that we find in the data. Let's assume that we find a monthly seasonal difference in the data. So our formula will look like y dash t is equal to yt minus 12. Now, since we know about converting a non-stationary data set into a stationary one, and we know how to perform the exploratory analysis, let's go ahead and understand more about modeling the time series. Let's understand what the ACF or PACF represents and how do we identify them. The ACF explains us how the present value of a given time series is correlated with the previous or the past values like 1 unit past or 2 unit past or n unit past value. The PACF can be explained using a linear regression where we predict the value of yt from yt minus 1 value or yt minus 2 respective values. Let's look at two examples to understand how do we identify the moving average or the autoregressive part from the ACF or PACF plot. In the first example, we see the ACF plot is gradually decreasing, whereas the PACF plot has a sharp cutoff after the time lag 1. These kind of plot represent the autoregressive one part where the one starts for the first lag at which the PACF is getting a sharp cutoff. Similarly, in the second example, we see the ACF is decreased sharply after the first time lag, whereas the PACF is decreasing slowly. That means it is a moving average 1 type. Let's start the modeling with the ARIMA model. Based on the concepts that we learned from ACF and PCF, ARIMA is known as autoregressive integrated moving average, where it takes into consideration both the autoregressive and the moving average elements. The integrated element in ARIMA refers to the differencing, allowing the method to support the time series dataset with a trend. The only problem with the time series analysis using ARIMA is that it does not support seasonal dataset, and we'll look at another solution which will help us to overcome it. How do we define an ARIMA model? It has three important factors or parameters which are P, D, Q. P refers to the order of the autoregressive part, which is the AR part. I refers to the order or the degree of first difference allowed. MA is the moving average Q part, which is the order of the moving average part. The ACF plot in this can be used, as we discussed earlier, to identify what should be the order of the P part and the Q part. ARIMA expects that the data of time series is neither seasonal or has the seasonal component removed, like we discussed earlier using seasonal differencing. Now let's look at another model where we don't have to worry about the seasonality. It is S-ARIMA. That is right. It's a seasonal autoregressive integrated moving average model. Seasonal ARIMA is an extension of ARIMA with a seasonal component. It adds three more hyperparameters to understand the AR, I, and the MA part for the seasonal component. And it looks something like this. ARIMA denoted by PDQ, which is the non-seasonal part that we capture from ARIMA. PDQ and M, these are the seasonal part which captures the seasonality of the data. Capital P is the seasonal autoregressive order, D is the seasonal difference order, Q is the seasonal moving average order, and M is basically to identify at what interval are we seeing the seasonality. Once we are done with building the model, it is very important to understand are we good in terms of using that particular model to make a forecast. And to do that, it is very important to check the residuals of the model that we have selected, like in this example, where we see at all the lag intervals, the spikes are within the confidence interval. That means our residual looks like white noise. So we can use this model in order to make the forecast. Next, Sindhuja will be covering a use case around forecasting demand and sales.
Rupa, that was a great overview of the time series models. Hi everyone, I'm Sindhuja Subramaniam, a staff data scientist from Global Technology Division of Walmart Labs. I'm excited to meet all of you and I'm looking forward to get you started on applications of time series concepts. So let's get started. The use case that we'll cover today is around forecasting demand and sales. Let's just talk about why this is important first and why we think time series based models or solutions can apply to this problem. We'll then move to formulating and narrowing down the problem statement, what sort of data sets we have, after which we'll go over examples of exploratory data analysis, how we look at it from models perspective, and what models can we apply, and finally, how do we evaluate. For any business, understanding when to be able to have stock to fulfill the demands of a customer is very crucial to driving availability, which in the long run contributes to customer satisfaction and retention. So, companies dealing with the space, for example, even Walmart, is always looking at the problem of when to refill and estimate when a customer would be requiring certain products and delivering those products on time. If the forecast is too high, especially in the case of perishables, say you order 100K tomatoes and only 50,000 of them got sold and nobody came back to purchase the rest of the 50,000, you can't even store it for more than its shelf life. So we are over investing and losing money here. On the contrary, if the forecast is too low, let's take the example of something that is in a lot of demand these days. For example, PS5 controllers. We are under investing in a widely selling product if we are not able to meet the demands of the customers, and hence losing the opportunity to grab the customers to our website or even retain them. So it is very important to answer these questions. How often do we replenish each product? How many units will the customers need? Is our forecast good for every time, or do we need to have different projections for different time frames? For example, is there a holiday influencing sales where probably people care more about high ticket products than vegetables? In addition, there are multiple factors that we need to consider at macro level, micro level, both in short term and long term for all sorts of forecasting problems. For example, you would think you use data from 2020 to train a model and things could work well for 2021. But that's not really the case because 2020 was the year when COVID struck hard, and that did have its own impact on both demand and supply and changed heavily the purchase patterns of customers. Similarly, what you predict might not really suit well for all cluster of customers. For example, in Chicago, Illinois, among millennial customers, there's a product that is trending. But that might not really work well for other clusters of customers residing in other states. You also need to consider that demand is different during short term predetermined timeframes every year, like Cyber Monday or Thanksgiving, just for those 2 to 3 days, versus long term forecast that you have to do. For example, when you might need to forecast for a new store that is getting built in a new area altogether. So the forecasting problem itself is multifaceted. It is both influenced and driven by multiple such combination of factors, which makes it all the more challenging and justifies a machine learned solution for it. So going back to our problem statement, what we are trying to do here is predicting the sales for Walmart so that we can use those numbers to restock inventory and be prepared. And we are trying to do it for approximately 28 days into the future. The data that is given to us is a 5-year data obtained from sales in 3 United States states of California, Texas, and Wisconsin, along with data on prices, promotions, and holidays. The data is clearly hierarchical because we have states and each state has different stores. Here there are totally 10 stores, and each store has product categories, and each product category is further divided into product subcategories, and then finally the products within these subcategories. So totally there are around 3049 products. So we could create time series at any level here. For example, we can do one for all the sales, or we can do three where each one belongs to predictions for each state. We'll narrow down our problem statement to predicting for all stores forecast of sales for each product. We have 10 stores and 3049 products as seen in the previous slide, and this means we'll need to make 10 into 3049 predictions, that is 30,490. Maybe all the stores will not have all the items, but this is the maximum that you need to predict even if all stores have all the items. We have some tables which provide us with necessary information to perform training and modeling. First table, which we see here, has item ID and some item level details like department and category. Then the state in which this item was purchased, and each D field here represents a day. So there will be as many values as number of days. One column for each day from 5-year period, not including the validation period of 28 days. The number of rows here is 30,490 for all combinations of 3049 products and 10 stores. As you can observe, this table is filled with zeros when there is no sales for the item that happened in that store on that day and one otherwise. So we would anticipate sparsity issues with this data, and but each row, however, is associated with item store pair, which represents all of this information uniquely, and this can be used as a training data set. We have two other tables, one which gives us the details about what price any item was sold at an average considered over a week, and in which week or year it was sold on, and another which tells us what events happened on a date. Snap is the name of the event for food stamp or coupon, so for each store there's a column associated. Three binary flags for whether stores in each state allowed purchases with SNAP food stamps at this date 1 or not 0. Given this kind of data, as of any case study, we start with exploratory data analysis using all of this data to derive insights. Examples: here is a graph on total sales as time series. Some insights just by looking at the graph that we can make. Firstly, there has been a gradual increase in sales over the years. So you can see peaks are higher for 2015 and 2016 rather than 2011 or 2012. In addition, we can also see that on certain days, the sales quantity is zero and it's represented by very sharp drops here and there. It seems to be happening annually and particularly close to the end of the year. So Walmarts are usually closed on Christmas Day, and that is what is represented by these sharp dips seen on the graph. Another example where we try to see if we can catch differences in state level sales patterns, we see that although this is pretty similar to the previous graph where we were looking at all sales, irrespective of the state, here also it is showing a gradual upward trend. Although this pattern is happening, the sales in California state is considerably higher than those of Texas or Wisconsin. Then we can also look at the category level data to see how many unique items are present in each category: food, household, and hobbies. This gives us an idea of how wide a category like food is, and also that food is purchased year round on day-to-day basis and in larger quantity. So sales from food are much higher as compared to hobbies or household. When we look at the same data over a period of time, over the years, the category level sales, we see that food sales have been pretty similar through the years and higher than the other two categories. There is a dip and rise pattern towards the end of the year as well. And we see that there's a slight difference in the dip and rise pattern between food versus household and hobby items. So we see that household and hobby items sell much less in January after the holiday season is over. This is another interesting slide where we are checking the sales of different categories on a monthly and weekly basis in different states. So we notice here that food tends to have lower number of purchases as the month goes on. This could be because people get their paychecks earlier in the month. And we also notice this interesting fact that at week level, we clearly see that weekends are much more popular shopping days, regardless of the item category. In addition, we could also analyze the event distribution for each store and percentage of the days with some event versus regular days. All of this will help us in deriving insights and help us use the training data well. For instance, here we see the importance of SNAP days for any business with a giant presence of grocery items. Walmart being one of them, it has a huge grocery presence. SNAP days are when customers look forward to buying food items at discounted prices, and when we are not able to meet the demands, we could lose customers. So for exploratory data analysis, there are 42,840 such combinations of time series we can create as seen in this table as well. Considering all the aggregations that we can do on this hierarchical data. We spoke earlier about all sales being one time series data, and then for at state level we have three, and this goes on at each level. So this table gives you a very good idea of how to compute such 42,840 such combinations of time series. We get into modeling the data. Sales data is very erratic and volatile at whatever level you look at. If you look at the top left image, you see a bunch of zeros right next to each other and a peak for few days. This is very noisy. To make sense of the data and forecast better, we need to smooth this data out to also be able to find the underlying trends well. The process of doing this is called denoising. Of course, there are many means to denoise the data. Here we speak about a simple yet popularly used method, average smoothing. On the image in the top, consider a fixed size window, say 10 elements, and place the window at the beginning of the time series. So first 10 elements. Calculate the mean of that section and move the window across the time series in forward direction by a stride. For example, if stride is 2, you move the window from 0 to 10 to 3 to 13. Again, you calculate the mean of the new window and repeat this process until the end of the time series. All the mean values we calculated are then concatenated into a new time series which forms the denoise sales data. The result is shown in the bottom image, which forms your denoise data, which you can now use for further steps. Now let's look at how to model the problem. Before we see what are the different ways to model the problem, let us revisit what lag means. Apurva also spoke about this earlier in her slides. Lag is nothing but value of the target variable shifted by a period. For example, 1 week lag value for an item in a given store is sales made 1 week ago for that specific item in that specific store. There are many ways to model time series problems. You could either train one model for all weeks, or train one model for each week, or do recursive modeling. Each approach has its own pros and cons. Obviously, the not so good option amongst these is training one model for all weeks. Here, because we are getting rid of all the information given by 27 most recent lags if we are predicting for D plus 28 day. On the contrary, having one model for each week means we capitalize on lag information for first 3 weeks. Recursive model, on the other hand, is where predictions for a given week are used as lag features for the following week. So errors can spread from week to week, but if done right for this particular problem of Walmart sales prediction, recursive modeling would work really well. Let's now talk about the model itself. We could start with a simple baseline to begin with, which is taking the average of all sales from last 28 days for each of the time series in the data. Of course, we can't stop at the baseline. So alternatively, we could apply seasonal ARIMA, which Apurva talked through, where we make ARIMA model a wide range of seasonal data by adding additional seasonal terms. So there would be non-seasonal part of the model and seasonal part of the model, and the additional seasonal terms are simply multiplied by the non-seasonal terms. Some examples of how the graphs look, where blue part of the data is used for training, and then the green represents the prediction and orange represents the validation data. So from these two images, where there are like two different data sets that we need to forecast, we see that Sarima is able to reasonably predict, especially in the second image where there are many low level and high level trends simultaneously happening. Now, how do we know this is good enough? We have a lot of models that we can try to use for forecasting problems. Irrespective of which model is chosen, we need a good measure. We're talking about sales data, which is intermittent, sporadic unit sales with lots of zeros. So if we go with absolute errors optimized for the median, then that would assign lower scores than forecasting methods that derive forecasts close to zero. So we use squared errors optimized for the mean. RMSSC described here is root mean square standardized error. In this equation, we have actual forecast minus predicted forecast squared. And n here represents the length of the training sample or number of historical observations. This measure is chosen because it is effectively used to compare forecasts across series with different scales, making it scale independent. It also penalizes both positive and negative forecast errors as well as large and small forecasts equally. So it is also symmetric. Most problems that involve time series are critical, and so metrics play an incredibly important part in evaluating the models. This brings us to the end of the workshop. I would like to conclude the workshop by saying that time series analysis is a must for every company to understand seasonality, cycles, trend, and randomness in sales. Our goal has been to give you a solid overview and provide you with both mathematical and application level knowledge of time series within the given time frame or window. For everything that we went through today, we have detailed links which you can use to learn more. Thank you to everyone who attended the workshop today, and thanks to Apurva as well for being a wonderful co-host. Thank you, everyone.